Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depends where you are watching from, where you are attending this webinar from. We welcome you to BYU Management and Scale Foundation webinar. The topic of our webinar today is learning how to learn with an AI focus. Today, we will hand over to Elder David Rupert, who would introduce Dr. John W. Matchell.
Thank you, Michael, and good afternoon, good evening to all of our brothers and sisters and friends in Africa. It's a wonderful day, and we are excited to spend this time with you and with Dr. John Mitchell. Now, it's my good pleasure to serve with John. John and I both sit on the global board of the BYU Management Society and act as VPs of Strategic Development. And John has a lifetime of learning and a lifetime of excellence and excelling at very high levels. And he currently serves as president for IPC, which is an international trade association, which I'm sure he'll talk more about. Prior to that, and actually in that organization, I was reading here, he's done so much to create sustainable workforces, online certification, which is all about growth and development, which is what BYU Management Society and SCEP is striving to do, and helping people have greater success. And his organization has 3,200 members around the world that he leads. And actually, see, also he has a best-selling book about fire your hiring habits. It was released in June of 2023. So that's fun to see. And without going through the rest of his bio, one thing we were talking about is when he was a student at BYU, where he got a undergraduate degree in engineering and computer science, electrical and computer engineering. He was the president of the local chapter for an organization called Golden Key International, which is an honor society. And so it's fun to see how he started with that, did other things, and eventually became the CEO for that Golden Key International Honor Society, which involved 400 universities and 2 million people around the world in 190 nations. So, and then after that, well, in the process of doing this, he went to Pepperdine University and got an MBA. Which is in Southern California, and then got a doctorate in education in Georgia, at University of Georgia. And so, John, we'll turn the time over to you. We're happy to have you here. We're excited to have you here. At the end of your presentation, give some time for some Q&A, and Michael and Tim Lynn will kind of coordinate that, and we'll go for there.
Sounds great, David. So thank you, everybody, for joining. I have forever loved learning. And so having the opportunity to talk about learning how to learn better is something that that I've studied my whole life. I have, as was mentioned by David, I have a doctorate in education. But it's really about what we're going to talk about today is some of the basics of how to make sure we can learn better, learn more things, and then we're going to spice it up a little bit as we get toward the end with some AI tools that can enhance things even further. So without further ado, let me jump into talking about meta-learning, which is really just the, learning how to learn. I may speak a little fast, but since we're being recorded, you'll have the chance to go back, which is good, and that's just another learning technique is review, right? So let's jump in. Let me talk first a little bit about the brain's learning modes. So there's really two learning modes, the ways that our brain works. One is called the focused mode, and that's where you intensely concentrate on a specific task. And so that activates specific regions of the brain for understanding new information. And this focused mode is crucial when you're learning something new for the initial learning phase. The second mode is called the diffuse mode. And this is where it's you have more of a relaxed or wandering mind. It facilitates creative thinking and connecting of various ideas. And it's vital for developing insights and innovative solutions. And so for us to learn effectively, we need to toggle between both focused and diffused learning modes, okay? And this allows for both a deep understanding as well as creative problem solving. I don't know if you've ever played pinball, but what this image is representing on the focus side here on your left, it's as if a pinball, you shoot the ball up, and it's the pinball where it's just rapidly moving around in just one particular part of the brain. And that's really good for helping us approach with intense concentration on a specific problem or concept. But while you're in that focus mode, sometimes you may find yourself focusing so intently to solve a problem, you may not be using all the right thoughts that you need to connect to, which might be in a different part of your mind. So that's like the black area versus the red area. And so sometimes you need to allow your brain to relax and let the balls move all around your brain and connect various things and various thoughts within your mind so that you don't get stuck in just a particular area. And so that's why we need to alternate between focus mode and diffuse mode. In order to shift between focus and diffuse mode, what you do is first you activate focus mode. You trigger this by directing your attention to a specific task. And the thing that makes that difficult, of course, is how do you stay completely focused on that? Because there can be distractions, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then when you want to enter a diffuse mode, you start relaxing and stopping focusing on that task. So you can do simple activities like walking around can facilitate this transition from moving from focus to diffuse. And then when you shift away from this focus, you enter the diffuse mode, and it gives you some fresh perspectives. Other ways that you can do that, and we'll talk about these more, are sleeping or exercising. Exercising boosts creativity and problem solving. Sleeping allows your subconscious to process information. Even traveling, riding in a vehicle or on a bike or walking can stimulate thought processes as different things enter your mind. So what you want to remember is you need both modes, but you need to alternate between them. Activities that seem unrelated to work, like sleep or exercise, can actually play a crucial role in your learning and creativity. But sometimes we get stuck. And there's a few reasons why you might get stuck as you're trying to learn something. One reason you might get stuck is because maybe the initial concept wasn't grasped. And the solution to this, if this is the problem, is of course revisiting and reviewing the material. Before the diffuse mode, that moving all around your brain can be effective, you really need to be engaged with foundational information, either through notes or your materials that you're studying. And sometimes you can get stuck in spite of understanding. You might feel frustrated even after you've diligently studied the material. And that's really because you failed to leverage the diffuse mode for problem solving because you've stayed too fixated. And again, the solution is to step away and engage in different activities to shift into that diffuse mode. In order to do that, ways you can get unstuck, again, take a break, don't stay too focused for too long. Alternatively, you can look at doing something completely different to just take your mind out of the situation. And when you do this, that approach really simplifies understanding because you're able to think of different things and move back and forth between the various modes. One of the challenges, of course, to learning is procrastination. And we see this a lot. You don't have to be a student to want to procrastinate. And procrastination really can severely impact your learning and productivity. When you procrastinate, you end up, the consequences are you end up with a shortage of time, and your brain needs time. It needs time to let those ideas sink in. And you'll also end up wasting energy worrying about things you haven't done, which distracts you from learning again. There's also an impact on learning in that high quality learning outcomes are achieved by repetition and practice. And so if you put it off to the very end, you don't have as much time for that repetition and practice. And then finally, one thing we see often at universities or schools is cramming. It's like, oh, at the last minute, I'm just going to stuff my brain full of all kinds of information. And the problem with this is it's flawed in that it skips that gradual process of knowledge acquisition, which leads to poor retention and understanding. I know some people who love to cram and it may help them on the test, but a few weeks later, that material isn't as firm in their mind as it could be. And so addressing procrastination is key to unlocking effective learning strategies. So it ensures both efficient use of time and the deep integration of knowledge. One of the ways that we can beat procrastination is utilizing something called the Pomodoro Technique, which was developed by Francisco Carrillo in the 1980s. It's named after the Italian word for tomato. That's why we have a picture of a tomato here. And it was inspired, he actually used it, he had a kitchen timer sitting on his table there that was shaped like a tomato, which is why he calls it this technique. And here's how it works. First, the only thing you need is a timer, okay? And a simple timer is core to what you need. And in fact, the simpler, the better. You want to first eliminate distractions, so you ensure that your workspace is free of anything that could break your concentration. Set the timer and start with 25 minutes dedicated solely to the thing you're going to study or try to learn. And then you want to focus intensely. Commit to working for that with all of your attention on your task. And then you take a rewarding break. So after that 25 minutes, you treat yourself. And the reward system is crucial. That way you can anticipate the benefit of the reward. It could be, hey, maybe I'll have a nice lemonade, or maybe I will reward myself with a 5-minute walk outside or something like that. Now, while you're in this intense focus period of 25 minutes, you want to pay attention. If you find yourself wandering in your thoughts, just jot them down quickly on a piece of paper so that you can say, hey, I've thought of that. I've jotted it down. I don't have to think about it anymore, and you can get back to focus. Again, you want to stick to just one task on this. So if you're learning how to juggle balls, you want to focus only on juggling the balls, not on whether you should paint them or not, or how you should store them, all right? So you want to be very focused on that. Now, the reason this is effective is it breaks down the work into manageable intervals, okay? It helps you feel like it's less daunting, and we'll talk about that. When you're trying to accomplish a large task that can feel very overwhelming, if you're trying to learn a new language or master a new skill, the breadth of that big objective can be very discouraging. It also emphasizes single tasking over multitasking. And multitasking really doesn't exist in our brains. Some of us think we do it, but really what we're doing is we're just switching between many things very fast. And the more times you switch, the less effective your thinking is. So being focused helps you utilize that. So by following the Pomodoro technique, you can enhance your focus, manage your time more effectively, and improve your learning and productivity. Next, let's talk about reading. A lot of the material we consume, we read. And one thing that's important in that is what we call utilizing a skill called active recall. So when you're reading a book and you have the various chapters, what you want to do is utilize active recall. It's the practice of consciously retrieving information from your mind, and it's a powerful technique for deepening your understanding and enhancing retention, which is what learning is all about. You want to understand and retain it. So how do we actively recall? So if you have a book, first thing you should do when you're reading a chapter is don't just read the chapter. Quickly turn through the pages. Look at the pictures, the titles, the summaries, anything that's highlighted. So you have an idea about what you're going to read before you read it. Now, once you've done that, you want to read carefully. Go through the chapter slowly. It's okay to mark a few important things, but don't mark too much. I see some people highlighting everything. That's as if you're highlighting nothing. So you really want to just mark only the few key points. Now, after you've read for a bit, stop, look away from the book, and try to remember the main ideas that you just read. Now, the important part is trying to remember on your own before you look back at the book. So you don't have to do this for every page, really just the important parts. But when you do that, that's what you're doing is active recall. So why is this good? When you try to remember things on your own, it helps your memory grow stronger. It's also better than just reading over the text many, many times because it makes your brain work harder to remember, which helps you learn better. Think of your brain as a muscle. When it has some good resistance, it gets stronger. But if it has no resistance, it's not getting as strong. So using active recall means testing yourself on what you've learned to really make sure it's stuck in your brain. So remember, there's basically 3 steps: the picture walk, read with care, and then utilizing active recall to test yourself without looking to see if you remember what you read. So that's another tool, active recall to learning. This is my favorite tool, and it's the one I'm the worst at. It's called sleep. Sleep is critical to learning. So it's like a superpower for your brain. It helps your brain practice what you've learned during the day. So here's how it works. Your brain goes over the things you learned while you're asleep. It's using the same paths in your brain over and over. It's like it's practicing while you're sleeping. And sleep helps make those connections stronger. During sleep, parts of your brain called dendritic spines grow. And this makes connections between the brain cells stronger, so it's easier for you to think about what you've learned. With respect to naps, they help, but it's really not enough. Taking a nap can move information from a temporary spot in your brain to a longer-term spot, and that clears up space so you can learn new things, but napping all day cannot replace a good night's sleep. So why good sleep matters? While you sleep, what you've learned moves from one part of your brain to another, where long-term memories are kept, and we'll talk a little bit about this in a couple of slides. And it also makes room for more. Sleep makes room for more space in your brain for new information by clearing out the temporal storage. So recommendations are that you should try to get 7.5 to 9 hours sleep every night. Different people vary, but pretty much, even though you may think you're functioning perfectly well on 4 or 5 hours sleep, you're probably not functioning as well as you could if you had 7.5 to 9 hours sleep. And it's not just rest. It really is a crucial time when your brain gets smarter by strengthening what it has learned and preparing to learn more. So this is the cycle that we're going to want to repeat, and you'll see us talk about this cycle as we go through here. You want to learn, you want to practice, and then you want to sleep. So learning and practicing and getting enough sleep are the key steps to really understanding new things. And here's why. It builds those brain connections we just talked about. Every time you learn and practice, your brain creates new connections, and then sleep like cements those in place. And then daily learning you want to do. So when you learn something new a little bit every day, you give your brain several chances to sleep on it, which means it's more opportunities for your brain to strengthen what you've learned. And then, of course, as we talked about the sleep, each night sleep helps you, the new stuff you learn become more solid part of what you know. It's kind of like building layers of bricks on a wall. It just gets better and better as it goes forward. So the mix of learning, practicing, and sleeping isn't just about getting better at something. It's actually about growing your brain in the way that makes learning stick. So remember, practice doesn't make perfect. Practice plus sleep does. So let's talk about the ways your brain, your memory systems work. So there's really 2 main systems for handling information: the working memory and long-term memory. So your working memory is quick but limited. It's like a temporary sticky note that's stuck on your brain. It's right at the, the precortical, this blue portion of the brain picture I'm showing here, right above your eyes. According to science, it can usually hold about 4 pieces of information at a time, although this number can vary slightly from person to person. And the information really only stays here for about 10 to 15 seconds unless you actively keep it there by focusing or repeating it. But it's crucial for this for temporarily remembering things that you're actively working on, but it is not meant for long-term storage. So long-term memory is really the brain storage unit. It can hold a vast amount of information, much more than your working memory. But the challenge is, because it stores so much, it can sometimes be tricky to retrieve specific information. So you want to understand that for something to be remembered long-term, it must move from working memory into long-term memory. And the exact capacity of working memory may vary for various people, but most people have about 4 slots of memory they can fill things with. And having more or fewer slots actually has advantages and disadvantages. So if you have more, that can help you in some ways, but it hurts you in other ways. And if you have less, it helps you in some ways and hurts you in other ways. So there's really no perfect number. Having, if I had, instead of 4 slots, if I had 20 slots, that will help me in some ways, but it will actually harm me in other ways. So don't worry if you can only remember 3 or if you can remember 10. These techniques will help you all the way along. So you need to understand these 2 systems are crucial for learning effectively because it highlights the importance of repetition and focused attention in making new knowledge stick. So here's let me just share a few tricks. Because we have such vast memories in our brains, there are various tricks and strategies we can use to help us remember things. So there's some visual imagery tricks that we use. And so our brains struggled memorizing just plain facts. If you have just a list of words, they struggle with that. But images actually make a much stronger impression. And here's how to leverage this for better memory retention. First, you want to transform facts into pictures. Visualizing information as images enhances memorability. And we'll talk about one of these techniques called the memory palace in just a moment. You want to embrace uniqueness. So think of bizarre things, silly things, crazy images to attach concepts to because it makes them more memorable. And then you also incorporating movement. You imagine these images moving around, that also will help further cement them in your memory. And so if you turn them into pictures, make them very unique, and then have them move around, it will help improve your recall as you're trying to remember the things you have to go. So there are various strategies for remembering things. There's a few very straightforward but powerful tips. First, concentrate. You need to give your attention to the material. Don't try to be doing multiple things at once. Second is repetition. Regularly practice recalling the information. The act of trying to remember things actually strengthens memory pathways. Visualize, converting information into mental images, makes those abstract concepts more concrete and memorable. And then connect it. Connect it to information that you already know. So for instance, when I talk to people and I say, hey, wouldn't it be great if you could read or study a vocabulary word every day? And they're like, yeah, that'd be wonderful. But I forget sometimes. And so what I advise them to do is, what's something you do every day? Well, I brush my teeth every day. I said, okay, while you're brushing your teeth, look at this word to learn. And now you've attached it something you're already going to do. And so similarly, you're going to attach new concepts to things you already know in your brain so that they will relate and you'll strengthen that connection. And then you want to do active recall that we talked about earlier. Frequently test yourself by trying to remember information without looking at your notes. This step is key to transferring your knowledge into the long-term memory. So adopting these techniques can significantly enhance your ability to remember and retrieve information when you need it, okay? Next, I talked briefly about the memory palace. I'm going to dive a little bit into this one because this has been a technique that's been used for centuries, even thousands of years. So it's a method for enhancing memory using familiar places as the mental framework for recalling information. And what you do is you choose a familiar place. You start with the location you know inside and out. It may be your home, your workplace, someplace you know intimately. You know where everything in it is. And then you assign information to a specific location. So let's use, for instance, my office. I'm sitting in my office now. I've got a desk in my office. There's a window. There's some bookshelves. There's a chair. There's some boxes over there that I really should have moved out by now, but they've been there for months. I've got a shelf over here. I've got my chair that I sit in, as well as a chair for someone else to sit in. And what I do is, as I walk through my office, I put things in each of those places. So let's say I was trying to remember periodic elements, or somebody's phone number, or parts of the body if I'm studying biology. And I can place those parts in different parts of the room. So I could say, okay, I'll just use something simple like a shopping list. If I'm going to go buy broccoli, I might put broccoli on the chair. But broccoli is not very interesting just sitting on the chair. Instead, I might tie it to some action, and the broccoli might sprout green hair going out. It might be a crazy broccoli guy dancing around on the chair, and then suddenly he jumps into my basket. So every time I walk into my office, I'm going to think, oh, well, there's that dancing broccoli that's on my chair. And then I go to the window, and outside the window, I see these blueberries smashing against the window, making all kinds of racket. And it's just blueberry juice pouring down the glass. And so I'll remember blueberries. And then if I go over to the shelf, I see these apples. And these apples are starting to roll around, and they're actually acting like they're bowling pins, and they're crashing into each other and exploding as they go forward on the shelf. So again, you see, I put the image into something familiar. So now when I close my eyes and I'm at the grocery store, I imagine my office. I walk in, I say, well, there's the chair. What's on the chair? And if I were to ask you now, you could type it in the comments, what's on the chair? Well, it's a jumping around piece of broccoli dancing. And then if I go look out the window, what do I see on the window? And you're going to remember these blueberry streaks just pouring down the window. And then I look over at the shelf next, and there, sure enough, are a bunch of apples exploding as they're bashing into each other like pins and bowling pins. So that's what you do with a memory palace. You take a familiar place and you place things in it. So as you walk through it later when you need it, you can pick up those things and remember them. But you want to make sure that you add motion and uniqueness, and sometimes a little craziness always goes a long way. And this is really effective because it uses your visual spatial memory. And it also helps you create meaningful connections to potentially abstract or random information that you go for. So the memory palace technique is one of the most famous and long-term techniques for remembering information. Now, there are lots of different ways. I just shared the memory palace technique, but you could look up other ones. You can make up songs about things. You can make up metaphors, taking good notes. Imagining that you yourself are the thing you're trying to remember and understand. Associating numbers with shapes or characters. Teaching the information to someone else. And of course, sleep is important to anchoring these new ideas that you are learning. The next thing we want to talk about is building brain links, okay? So you start by putting this information in the working memory that we talked about, and you want to transition over time this information into your long-term memory so you can utilize it. And when you do that, that frees up working memory for further information. So what this does is it takes it beyond just simple understanding of a concept. It's not enough for you to understand a concept for you to really form durable brain links. You need to also consistently practice. Consistent practice is essential for embedding the knowledge deeply within your long-term memory and enhancing comprehension over time. You also shouldn't try to immediately be too deeply focused on all the details. It'll just be too much. Start at a higher level. It is possible to overthink, which can lead you to decision paralysis or confusion. All right, so don't get too overemphasized in understanding every single minute point. And then you can use other effective learning strategies as well, like mastery learning, where knowledge is built incrementally, and that allows for gradual development of strong brain links before moving on to more complex ideas. So you build with the basis, maybe very small but important building blocks, and then you take the next larger stuff and build on top of that how it relates, and the smaller stuff. Whereas if you try to master it all at once, you can get overwhelmed. So while understanding the concepts is vital, the creation and reinforcement of these brain links through practice is what truly embeds knowledge into your long-term memory, facilitating efficient handling of complex information. So we want to make learning stick, and we'll do this with two tricks. One is called deliberate practice. So simply repeating things is actually not enough to build strong practice and brain links. If I were learning to play the piano and all I did was just the scales at one time, does not make me a brilliant pianist. The the quality of practice matters immensely. We need to avoid what's called lazy learning. So once you understand something, say I know how to play my scales on the piano, continuing to practice it in exactly the same way becomes lazy learning, which doesn't challenge the brain to form new connections. Again, think of the muscle. Your brain is a muscle. You want to exercise it by doing hard things so it gets stronger. So you focus on these challenges. Deliberate practice involves concentrating on aspects that are difficult. And this approach ensures continuous growth in the formation of those dendrites we talked about, leading to stronger neural connections, all right? In addition to deliberate practice, there's something called interleaving that is another great tool for making information stick in your brain. Interleaving means practicing different elements or types of problems within the same study session. So this is in contrast to focusing on one type of problem repeatedly before moving on to another. So if you're studying one certain type of thing, just doing that same thing over and over and over, interleaving is saying, hey, let's do different kinds of those kinds of problems. It also involves seeing the bigger picture. So by mixing different topics or types of problems, interleaving helps in distinguishing and understanding the nuances between them. So it not only enhances adaptability, but also deepens comprehension by forcing your brain to constantly adjust and apply the concepts in different ways. So if you know how to play the piano, maybe you might try whistling the tune or imagining how it might sound with a full orchestra or something along those lines. So again, you're thinking about it in different ways. You're interleaving the same concepts, but utilizing different methodologies. And so deliberate practice really pushes you out of your comfort zone and prompts your brain to adapt and strengthen the connections in response to the new challenges. And then interleaving enhances your flexibility and aids in you in developing more comprehensive understanding by exposing you to a wider range of information. So using these together, you will actually foster robust brain links, making the learning process more efficient and the knowledge gained more durable or lasting. This is what I always find interesting. So many people talk about their learning styles. Oh, I'm a visual learner, or I'm an auditorial learner. Well, actually, the best way to learn is to use all of your senses. Use as much as you can. Your visual, read some things, look at some things. Your auditory, listen to some things without seeing them. Kinesthetic, act them out, sing them, read or write them down. Utilizing all of them, it's not just about using your eyes or ears, but it's engaging as many senses as you can. And this helps your brain build a fuller picture of what you're learning. And you want to mix it up. If you feel like, oh, well, I can only learn things visually, you're actually fooling yourself. This having just a single style is actually a myth. All the science says that there is nobody that is just a visual learner. By mixing it, we all learn in various ways. So don't be afraid to do things that are a little bit different because it helps your brain retain more information. Effective note-taking is another way that we go about this. And so taking notes by hand instead of typing them is actually one of the best ways to remember what you learn. Handwriting actually boosts memory. When you write notes with pen and paper, it forces you to think about what you're writing. And this process, again, starts building those brain links. It helps your brain to begin forming new connections. When I was studying mathematics, I had to do proofs in one of my math classes. And I was struggling mastering them until I just started writing out the proofs, and it helped establish that in my mind. And then you want to review your handwritten notes before going to bed, so sleeping can further enhance your memory. It's almost like you get an extra study session while you're asleep. So just one other tip for if you're going to take handwritten notes. I do this with lots of things, but divide your page. You see it has a page with a line drawn down it. Draw a line about 1/3 of the way in from the edge of the paper. And then in the larger section, write your initial notes. And then later, you can summarize your main points in the smaller section. And then, of course, we want to do the active recall again. After summarizing, you're going to try to remember those key points without looking at them. Active recall, you're going to need to do that all the time to help solidify this information in your mind. So this note-taking method not only helps with better retention of information, but it also organizes your notes in a way that makes retrieving key concepts more efficient. All right, who's ready to talk a little bit about AI? So all of that's great that I've just been sharing with you. And now the AI world is changing everything that we do very rapidly. So I wanted to start by sharing with you a few AI tools that I've seen work very effectively to help you learn. The first one is Socratic. That's the one that has that owl icon. So Socratic is an AI software tool which you can use alongside with your lesson materials to search for better, fuller, more visual explanations to questions to math, chemistry, literature, and more. Okay? So it actually is a tool to enhance your learning. You use it alongside. If I were taking an advanced algebra course, I could go to Socratic and it would give me alternate ways of seeing the same kinds of material, which is great. Nuance, the one just a little above it in blue there where it says Nuance, is a speech recognition app that will type out whatever you say. And so if you're a slow typer, you might want to use Nuance. And then, of course, if you use Nuance, you could also then use Copyscape afterwards, which is another AI tool that makes sure that you're not plagiarizing anything. And then you could use Gradescope, which is another AI tool, to see how the teacher might grade your work before you turn it in, so it gives you a chance to improve it before you send it in. The next one is the big G there, Grammarly. It's an AI-based writing tool. It's not just for spelling and grammar suggestions, but it actually gives you style and tone suggestions as well. So if you're starting a small business and you're writing a marketing ad or a blog, you can get suggestions from Grammarly. And then, of course, there's ChatGPT. That's the black and white one there, just cut off a little bit here. This is great for idea generation, asking questions about stuff and learning how to make queries. And when you use ChatGPT, you need to be careful, though, because you shouldn't just cut and paste and take the answers as they are, because very often they're not strictly accurate. But it's a great tool for generating ideas. Say you want to start a marketing ad about selling a new product. You can say, hey, what are some of the important points that people would find interesting about, my stapler if I'm going to sell staplers? And it might give you some ideas. And that ideation will help you come up with your own ideas, maybe give you some key points that you can utilize there. But don't just cut and paste it, because chances are the information is not perfect, okay? There are also note-taking apps. Often when I'm working with one of my coaches, even in Zoom, she utilizes Otter AI. And what that does is it transcribes everything that I'm listening to. And in fact, right now we're in Zoom, that we're recording this, and hopefully it will generate a transcription as well when we're done. I know my version of Zoom does. And if I click on the AI button, it'll actually give me a summary of the entire meeting. So you can, even within Zoom, there are note-taking apps you can utilize, Otter AI, Fireflies. You can even use these apps while you're in a classroom and just record it, and it will take notes of what the lecturer is saying or other people are saying while you're going. So it generates the notes so you have a record of it. And then finally, the one on the far side, which is the blue cloudy thing over there, that's called notebooklm.google.com. And what I love about NotebookLM is that you get to you choose the sources that the AI uses. So for instance, if I had a textbook, so David mentioned that I'd written a book called Fire Your Hiring Habits. I actually took my book and I dropped it in as one of the 20 sources that I could put into this NotebookLM. And then I took a couple other articles and then some notes I had taken from another lecture. And based on that, the AI will only use that information. Now, you remember I mentioned in ChatGPT, you can get some bad information. That's because it's using pretty much the entire internet, and there's good information out there and there's garbage information out there. With NotebookLM, you can tell the AI just to use the information you want it to use. And when it generates sources about that, it'll actually give you references back to the material that you put in to tell you where it got that information from. So it's a great tool. So imagine that you're studying a course or some new skill. So you start studying with Socratic to enhance your learning. And then you capture all your notes with Otter or Fireflies. And then you add more notes on your own with Nuance by talking to it. Then you can take all of these notes, drop them into Notebook LM to get various insights and summaries. And then you can ask Notebook LM those AI-like questions, and then you can develop outlines and story points. So you use these tools in series to generate different works or ideas or outlines that can then help you progress and learn as well as generate output. So well, these all kind of talk about, well, then you could take those summaries. Let me just take it a little bit further here and drop that in. That could become your marketing material. You can put it into Grammarly to see that it's well constructed and then publish it. So all of this helps you craft your learning, capture your information so you can review it to learn it, and then actually summarize it so that you can remember key points as you go to generate information outside of it. Now, the examples I used here were mainly about information, but there are similar tools for art or images. One of the magazines that we publish at our Electronics Trade Association, all of the artwork is done by AI. We just tell it what kind of images we'd like to see, give it direction, and we publish that art right away, right out of there. It's fantastic. So let me talk a little bit about, I don't know if any of you ever struggle remembering things or feel like you have a poor working memory. So having a poor working memory is not always a disadvantage. In fact, sometimes it can be a secret strength, especially when it comes to creativity and problem solving. So working harder actually leads to simplicity. So if you're, what we mentioned having, somewhere between 3 and 7 different slots that you can put in there to remember things by. But if you have a limitation, you can only remember a few things, it actually forces you to find simpler and more creative ways to link ideas together. And the result, your brain links might be more elegantly simplified and innovative. And sometimes if you forget stuff, it can actually spark creativity. People with a smaller working memory capacity might find thoughts slipping away more easily. And while that might seem like a drawback, it actually allows for new ideas to enter the mind more freely, often leading to higher creativity. So there's a trade-off. Yes, if your working memory isn't as strong, you might have to put in more effort to form connections between concepts. But that extra effort can actually make it easier for you to come up with unique and creative solutions that others might see. Research actually suggests that what some people might see as a limitation can actually be a source of creative power. So if you have a few less buckets to use on your attentional, in your attention or in your working memory, it might just be a hidden advantage for you. So don't be saddened if you don't feel like you can remember as many things all at once. So let's talk a little bit about our mindset around learning, also important here. So we need to embrace learning not as a chore, but as an opportunity. And when we do that, it changes the way we approach our interests and passions. When we shift from we have to do something to we get to do something, it can totally make a difference in our lives and learnings. That attitude and mindset makes a total difference. First, you can expand your passions. Learning isn't just about following paths that you're passionate about, but it's also discovering new areas of interest that could lead to unexpected opportunities. So having a positive mindset about this, looking at this as an opportunity, broadens your scope of learning, and you're preparing yourself for a world that's constantly changing. It allows you to keep your options open. As you navigate through life, maintaining an open mind about your interests and potential career paths is crucial. The world's becoming increasingly complex, and having a wide range of skills and interests makes you more adaptable and prepared for whatever comes your way. Next, persistent pays off. True learning requires persistence. However, persistent doesn't mean pushing through without breaks. Remember the Pomodoro Technique? It means constantly coming back to tackle challenges after giving your mind time to rest and process the information in the background. And then finally, you need to stay flexible. Being open to realizing that when you're wrong and willing to change your perspective is invaluable. One of the guys I work with, his name's David Bergman. He's fantastic. He has a massive amount of experience, and sometimes he can get very directed. But as soon as you provide him with the information that says his direction is wrong, he has the amazing ability to shift and change and say, oh, that was wrong. Okay, great. Let's go this way. It's a skill that I wish we could all have, because admitting our mistakes and adjusting our approach based on new information is a sign of strength and flexibility in our learning. So by shifting your mindset from seeing learning as an obligation, I have to learn this, to viewing it as a privilege, I get to learn this, you open yourself up to a lifetime of growth, discovery, and resilience in the face of change. So there's just a few different examples from the Harvard Business Review about, self-talk here. I don't need to learn this. Instead of saying things like that, you say, what would my future look like if I did learn this? Or, oh, this is boring. And instead change the question to, well, I wonder why others find this interesting. And so we just have to adjust how we think about things to actually gain more out of learning opportunities. Here's a few other AI tools. I only talked about some that are related to writing, but if you're working on math, there's a tool called Mathly, great tool to help you study. We talked about Grammarly before if you're doing essay writing. If you're a programmer, you might try things like Unschooler. If you're struggling with new concepts, I love both the title of this app as well as the silly, angry-looking owl icon. It's called Explain Like I'm 5, which I just think is beautiful. If you're looking to improve your language, there's GPT Dictionary. Video learning, there's an app called Kiwi. If you're looking to study, there's an app called Exam Cram. If you're trying to create, another app called Geleza. I may be pronouncing that wrong, but I haven't used that one. And then if you're looking to learn new topics, there's Tutor AI. So there are, now by the time somebody listens to this recording, even next week, there'll be 20 more AI apps out there. So you constantly need to be refreshing, but these are good ones that I've seen many people use that I think can be very helpful to you, depending on what you're looking to do. The other thing to remember is you need to set aside the time. And so as you're trying to learn things, being able to manage your schedule, prioritize your learning, and then develop tracking and habits are very important. One of the best ways, if you're familiar with the app called Duolingo, it's a freemium app to learn different languages. And they utilize a couple of techniques to make sure that you stay engaged with their app, just like games do or Instagram or TikTok does. One of the things that Duolingo uses is a tool called Streaks. So it just shows you how many consecutive days you've continued to do this. You don't need an app to do this. You can use apps. There are lots of apps out there to track these things. Several of them are free as well. But you can also just do it on a calendar. Put a little red X each day that you do the studying that you said you were going to do, and gradually you start building this string of consecutiveness that you don't want to break because you'll have to start all over again. Similarly, Duolingo spent millions of dollars using AI review of their millions of users to determine when was the best time to set a reminder to say, hey, it's time for you to use Duolingo again, or to do your studying again. And after all that research, the answer that came back was the following. So this is millions of dollars of research in one simple phrase for you right here. The answer is 24 hours after the last time you studied, which means if you were free at this time of day today to do your studying, chances are you're probably free that time tomorrow. So just set a reminder and say, it's time to study. And you get an alert on your phone or on your alarm clock or something, or your computer that says, hey, or on your smartphone, that says, hey, it's time for me to do the studying I planned to do. So finally, many of these ideas, there's more research you can do. We're trying to cover this very quickly, and I wanted to make sure I leave some time for questions. But there's additional research, all kinds of books here that I'll include in these slides that are great for how, great resources for how to learn. But the one message I would like to leave you with is that once you create the big goal, it's important to set up a consistent and repeatable process that we do daily. If we spend too much time thinking about a very large goal, we can become discouraged. You know, the famous question is, I believe it was Desmond Tutu that was asked, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Or the phrase, a little rain each day will fill the rivers to overflowing. So it's gradual pieces over time. Look to your processes and your goal will be reached. Thank you.
Fabulous, John. Hey, Michael, do we have any questions in Timlin?
I'm glad we recorded it. There's a lot of information we went through really quickly there.
Well, while they're generating questions, I loved it because it brought together various techniques I've learned over the years, and you did it in a masterful way. I think this was really well done. But it's one of these things you got to listen to a few times in practice. So, hey, Michael and Timlin, do we have any questions?
All right, hello, Rupert. So I'm looking through the questions. I'm not seeing any questions here now. The only question that Obal asked was, can we have the AI tools and their various functions, which I think John already shared a slide on that.
Yeah, so there's this slide, and there's also so we'll send these slides around, but
yes,
there's that slide and then this slide, and just the names of them, you can just Google it and you can figure out where the tools are, as opposed to me just filling up a bunch of slides with links.
Sure. So John, this is my question. Can we have the list of the additional resources? Confidence, yes. What we are going to do is, after this webinar, we'll paste this whole recording and other resources on the BYU management website. I'm going to send that website into the chat box. So just click on it or save it somewhere and just keep visiting the website, and you see previous webinars and other resources that we have on the page. So I will share that with you. Okay. That is confidence. So John, I was going to ask a question before I start reading confidence question. I mean, with the AI world that we, the youngsters, are kind of seeing a rapid growth of it today, using kind of our brain to study so much, it looks like we are looking for a shorter cut where we use AI resources to either do our assignments or more things than using part of our brains to help us do that. What kind of advice do you have for us as the younger generations that we have AI and also have the ability to use our brains?
So, AI is a fantastic tool for both condensing and summarizing and grabbing a massive amounts of information. So there's no substitute for you indulging it in your brain through some of the techniques we talked about today. But you can use AI to help you recall things that maybe you're not using every day. So if you take good notes, like I use Notebook LM as a second brain application, and it's free from Google. At least right now it's free from Google. So I'll put my notes in there and I'll go, okay, what I went to this seminar last year and I didn't remember all the key points, so I can drop my notes in there and it gives me a summary in 2 seconds. And I'm like, oh yeah, that was that piece. And if I click on it, it will bring me to the specifics that I wanted to remember without having to search through hundreds of thousands of words of notes. If I have a PDF that somebody shares with me, I can get it quickly summarized. So we talked about, doing active recall on books. Well, if you have an ebook, you can drop it in there and get the summary beforehand, so you know what you're going to be reading, so it reinforces what you're doing. But there's every day there's new tools that are coming out to advance that. So, but there needs to be a balance. You can't just say, oh, well, the AI knows it, so I don't need to know anything, because if you're at that level, then there's no real purpose in you being involved, and you want to make sure you're bringing value, connecting different resources. I saw some of those AI tools are free, some are not. There was a question, and then I also saw a question from Teresa, I think, said, how do we manage stress when we're learning? That's part of what those breaks are about, and it's also about breaking it into small pieces. So if you find it stressful because you're probably thinking about, oh, I've got so much to learn. Instead, break it down into smaller pieces, and that will help you manage your stress so it can be bite-sized chunks. Someone else has their hand up as well. Is it Omojola?
Jola, go for it. Omojola, unmute your microphone and go for it. Ask your question. Jola, your microphone is muted. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I really appreciate the wonderful lecture today. Brother Mitchell, as we get old, there is memory loss. How do we relate all this to the functions of the brain?
Yeah, first, my first advice, don't get old. We should just stop that. But I haven't figured out how to do that one yet. So repetition is really good. There's also, there are memory games and things like that to strengthen your mind. But, you know, they talk about retention of material. And if you learn something in one day and then you review it within, I believe they said a few hours, and then it's like 3 days, then 7 days, then 1 month, then it can last forever. But constantly going back and trying to remember things like that will help re-solidify those connections in your brain. And then exercise is also another great way to help with our memories for a longer term as well. Exercise actually helps our brain tremendously. Just a couple of quick, but that's the age-old question: is how do our brains get better? And in fact, we can get our brains can continue to grow throughout our lives. They used to not think that was the case. They thought they stopped maturing. But if you're actively using your brain, they continue to improve well into your later years. So I'm still trying to improve my brain, and I'm 1,000 years old.
Thank you.
All right, John, we have another question in the chat box.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen that.
I'm looking for which one?
The last, before the recent one. It says, how do we reconcile the challenge of plagiarizing when using AI tools?
Yeah, so I mentioned it briefly, but there is actually an AI tool that will tell you if you're plagiarizing, which is great. It's called Copyscape. Copyscape. And so if you use your material and run it through Copyscape, it'll let you know if you're plagiarizing anything. So you don't want to do that. That is bad. Or if you're going to copy somebody's work, just cite it. Give them credit. Taking notes by writing down helps me memorize a lot for future reference. It's also thrilled to hear their AI apps can do that for you. Yep. But even though the AI will take notes for you, writing down the concepts still is better than having it take notes for you. But sometimes you can't capture everything. And so that's where you try to mix both AI with, old methodologies of handwriting things down. It'll solidify it in your mind more than, the AI will remember it because it took the notes. So you just have to think about it that way. It's like if your friend took your notes for you and handed you the notes, how much of that are you going to remember? Not as much as if you took the notes yourself. Any other last questions? We got about 2 minutes left.
So, John, with all of this, how much, and I know you touched on this, but how much do you stress the benefit for being consistent, just consistently trying to apply a few of these things that feel comfortable to people? How much of a difference does that make in somebody's life?
It's like everything in life. It makes the world of difference. So I happen to do Ironman triathlons, and I'm a terrible swimmer. And I had a friend who was a terrible swimmer. And by swimming a little bit each day, we became capable to complete an Ironman race and actually do pretty well at the swimming. So just like our physical muscles, continually doing, if you do too much, if you try to put too much in your brain all at once, it's just like trying to lift 10,000 pounds. It's really difficult. But if you try a little bit at a time and you build and build and build, that's the base we were talking about, then your brain muscle, if you will, gets stronger. And so that consistency is what that's about. Cramming at the end or only doing it once a week. It's like playing a piano is another thing that we learn. It's physical, it's mental, it's audio, it's all kinds of things. But if you do all your practice on Saturday only, you will not get better. Even if you do 8 hours of practice on Saturday, you won't get as good as if you were to do 30 minutes of practice every day.
Thank you.
So consistency. Thanks for that question. That's really a good one.
Well, John, thank you for coming on. And for all those who are asking about how do we get access to this information, as Joseph said, the slides and the recording will be posted to the BYU Management Society Africa region page. And so we encourage you to reference those, to refer your friends to this. That's the purpose behind the BYU Management Society and SCEP. We love our SCEP partners because we're all working together trying to help each other. And so please share this information. You can have group discussions. There's so much you can do with the information that we've received today. And John, I think it was absolutely amazing. But now it comes time for all of us to put this to work and to help us go to the next level in our lives. So thank you. On behalf of the Management Society and SCEP, we thank you for what you've done today.
I enjoyed it. Thank you
so
for
much,
having
John.
me the opportunity.
That was wonderful.
Thanks.
And thanks everyone for coming. Good to see you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate, for your support with this.